Welcome to the Fleet Geeks podcast. We're here to help develop fleet and transport professionals. Do you want to progress and develop your skills and knowledge? We promise to bring lively conversation and debate around interesting issues and keep you bang up to date with changes in our awesome industry. The Fleet Geeks are a community of professionals, and if you enjoy the podcast, why not join the discussion for free in the Fleet Geek community over on Facebook?
The red light is rolling, and welcome to the Fleet Geeks podcast. Now, one of the big areas that I know absolutely not a lot about, despite having a few waste customers that we look after, we don't tend to look after this area of their waste transport. And it's something that I've got a bit of an interest in. And Chris, who I've got on with me today, is an absolute expert in the field of waste transport and understanding that part of the sector. He's got this qualification called WAMITAB or COTC or whatever it's called. And we're just going to dispel what that really means as part of this podcast. But the reason I wanted to get Chris on to share some of his expertise with you all is that we were talking recently in a chat about if a new transport manager was to join a company as the named transport manager and they cover waste and they need a WAMITAB and those kinds of things, this podcast is going to be really useful for you to have a listen to be able to understand a bit more about it and what's required, and whether that's a qualification you want to go and get yourself or whether you get a consultant in like Chris who will be able to help look after that area for you, and just a bit more information about the type of thing that role does. So Chris, first of all, are you able to just introduce yourself for the benefit of the listeners? Who is Chris? Tell us a quick bit about your business, mate.
So my name's Chris Kehoe. I am the owner of Enviro Logistics Consulting. We help companies stay within the regulations such as transport and waste. And anyone kind of working in transport knows that the regulations are how it's interpreted. So that's what we do as consultants. We help people interpret and follow the regulations as they should be.
Excellent, mate. And you're a transport manager as well as, so you're a qualified transport manager and the holder of this waste qualification as well, aren't you? And that's kind of your bag, mate, isn't it? That's kind of your bag. So Chris and I met last year at the Health and Safety Expo, didn't we? And I know you've had a listen to the odd podcast and that kind of stuff. And since then, we've been working together on building up the Enviro Logistics business because it's an absolutely fantastic business. And I think if you do waste and you're interested in the waste sector, it's well worth having a chat with Chris, because I'll tell you what, I'm blown away with the stuff he knows. I think it's absolutely fantastic. So I just thought I'd blow a little bit of smoke up your ass, mate. I'm going to stop now. Because your head won't fit in that little 2-inch screen that I've given you. So if I'm a new transport manager, mate, and I'm going to join and I'm starting at a waste company, okay, and they do waste in one form or another, what is it that I need to look out for? Chris?
There's quite a lot of things in terms of the actual movement. So if you think of waste management, it's about 3 things only. It's about moving, sorting and storage. So how you do all those things. So obviously, if you store it, you've got to have certain permit requirements on site, and that's governed by the Environment Agency. You've got the movement of waste, so that can be hazardous or non-hazardous. There's a lot of things that kind of come off the back of that, such as ADR for driver requirements. You've got your ADR kit, the old school TREM cards. You've got the ADR bags, the wheel chocks, all that kind of thing from a driver's perspective. Then you've got the hazardous waste transfer notes, which is most often called a consignment note, and then you've got a transfer note for non-hazardous. So it's just about what information needs to go into them documents, who needs to fill them in, who's responsible for them. So you've got the consignee, who owns the waste, who's carrying the waste, where that waste is going. So one thing in terms of waste you'll hear a lot of is about duty of care. So duty of care is if you are removing waste from one permitted site to another, the duty of care on the company that holds that waste, they have to know that the person, if it's not their own drivers, if it's an external company, are registered as a waste carrier. So you've got to have evidence on that. You've got to have evidence that where it's going to actually owns a permit for that type of waste. So the type of waste is always coming down to what's called an EWC code, European Waste Catalogue, and it's a 6-digit number.
So it's complicated. It's complicated.
It is.
Right?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that kind of goes into it from a site perspective. It's how I started out. So I started out as a transport depot manager for a company, and they had three depots, and they was a clinical waste transfer station, and never kind of worked in waste before. I've always enjoyed compliance. I've always, I think I've got a good understanding of once you remember something and you understand it, it makes it so much easier to remember. And when I started doing that WAMITAB course, I had my assessor I still work with today. It was a case of, we'll come back, in 2 months' time, we'll assess what you've done. I don't like working like that. So in terms of how long it took me, I think I was the quickest within that company to ever pass it. So it did take me 3 months to gather the evidence to it, because it's an evidence-based qualification. And it took me a week to answer the questions, which I've never seen ever. But it was like 12-hour days. It took a long day to do it, but that's just kind of how I work and how I better understand things. So yeah, it's very technical.
Excellent. And so I understand, because the qualification is called a range of stuff, and it's like anything else in transport. You've got a load of abbreviations and things like that. So as I was prepping for this, I had a quick look, and you've got COTC, WAMITAB, CIWM, and TCM. So that's like 4 abbreviations. Now, I'm pretty sure you'll know what those are, but they're all, well, the Chartered Institute of Waste Management is CIWM. I understand that. So they're obviously part of it. But what I'm guessing they accredit the course. I'm assuming they accredit the qualification. But what's the difference between WAMITAB and COTC? Is it the same thing?
No. So WAMITAB was something, if I'm right in saying, so it's something that was created by the Chartered Institute of Waste Management, which is where the CIWM comes for. So WAMITAB stands for Waste Management Training and Advisory Board. So they was the main company that kind of hosted that qualification. So anything, that all come through them. That, I'm not sure when that started. I think that was around the 80s. Okay. I may or may not be wrong on that. Yeah, so then what happened? CIWM kind of took that under their wing. So I think it was a CIWM business, but it was a separate.
You smashed it, mate. 1989, by the way. You smashed it.
Yeah. So CIWM brought that in under their umbrella. So COTC is, so in transport, you've got a CPC. So it's a certificate of professional competence. And it's very similar to that one, but this is technical. So it's a certificate of technical competence. Excuse me. So once we've passed the primary certificate, which is what it's called, once you've finished that qualification, you're then allowed to manage certain sites. So there's lots of different sites. Let me just cough a sec. So you've got a range. You've got non-hazardous, medium risk, high risk. So the high risk would be clinical waste, which is where I've got most of my experience from. Medium risk can be anything sort of household waste. You've got ELVs, which is scrapyards. They're more of a high risk due to the nature of what they are, the airbags, the fuel, and all that kind of stuff. So, and then you've got asbestos. There's so many. So you do have hierarchy qualifications. So the ones I've got is high risk treatment transfer. So that covers any what it used to cover a lot of sites that used to be under that, because that was considered the hierarchy qualification. But what you get a lot of times now is the environment agencies. There was a site that I was covering that was in ELV, and it was a medium risk. So I got asked by the environment agency, your certificate doesn't cover that. And I think a lot of people will relate with this. It doesn't cover it. You need to go and get that certificate. And all that means is you don't have to do that primary certificate. All you do is put yourself into Pearson View and do the continuing competence. So that's something that anybody that is qualified as with the COTC certificate, you have to keep that up to date every 2 years. And it's just a simple test in regulations, health and safety, and other bits and bobs specific to that industry, whichever one you choose. So I do have quite a few at the minute. I'm doing 2 a year.
Mm-hmm.
So that one that I do, if I do one this month, that'll last 2 year. But yeah, I've got quite a lot of areas and a lot of different certificates that I can work in.
Excellent, mate. Excellent. And I picked up there about the EA, so the Environment Agency. Are they similar to the Traffic Commissioner, or are they similar to the DVSA when we talk about sort of transport from a regulator point of view?
I think they kind of roll into one.
And what is it the EA do, like with transport operators? Do they fine them? Can they punish them? Can they take away their right to operate? How does that work?
From a transport perspective, no. That always falls under the Traffic Commissioner. So the Environment Agency basically manage the whole of the waste processes. It's very different to the Traffic Commissioner. I think one of the main things is the accountability from a transport manager that I think most transport managers understand. If something goes wrong at an operator and you wasn't aware of it, the question is, why wasn't you aware of it? And then you get called to a public inquiry and you're stood next to the operator. In waste management is very different. I've got somebody I'm helping at the minute. I've only been working this company 2 weeks. They're looking to transfer the permit to sell the business, and they are in a little bit of a pickle because they've been asked for an interview under caution, and they're an ELV unit, and this is one of the things. So in terms of the requirements to the permit, they are compliant, but because they said that they would get an interceptor prior to the permit being applied for, and that goes into a fire prevention plan as part of their operating procedures, as well as the environmental management system. Two main documents a lot of people know about. And so because they said they would do it and they never did, they're in breach of their permit. So the Environment Agency are coming in quite hard with them and saying, they've falsified documentation, they've got a permit under false pretenses. So when I got asked to call in and help with this transfer of the permit, I said to the Environment Agency, we will transfer the permit, but we are not having an interceptor. They don't need it. They're not big enough. They only sort of manage maybe 5 to 10 cars in a week. They're not a huge business. So you've got two businesses there, one who doesn't have the interceptor and the other one that does, and they're worlds apart. One's compliant, one's not, just because of what the operator said that they're going to do. And it's one of them things, if you say you're going to do something, you have to do it, because you will be held accountable on your words, on what you're saying to them. And, and that can result in, it's quite daunting to be asked to come in for an interview under caution. So they're kind of worried at the minute, but the new owner wants to get it moving. So I'm kind of helping them with that.
And what could the outcome of that be? So if that's handled badly, will they get a rap across the knuckles? Will they get a fine? Is it expensive?
It can be. Yeah, you've heard of a lot of companies that have waste facilities that it can go to the courts. You can get custodial sentences from it.
Okay, so people go to prison, right?
Yeah. When it comes to waste crimes, absolutely. Yeah, they take care of the Environment Agency, take things like this pretty serious.
Right. Okay. So it's so it's a pretty big deal then. It's a pretty big deal. And with regards to the Environment Agency, is that a good opportunity for you to then go in and help a company if they're having a challenge by the Environment Agency and they're potentially going to have an interview under caution? Is that a good opportunity for you to go in and then help them to make sure that sort of goes well, I suppose? Because I'm assuming it's a bit like, when you deal with the agencies in the transport sector, how you handle a desk-based assessment, for example, and how you respond to that. It's important to make sure you respond to it effectively to avoid further issues down the line rather than digging yourself a big hole. So would you say that there's an opportunity there for you to avoid punishment if it's handled well?
Hello, it's Shani from Flagship Partners. We are really proud to sponsor the Fleet Geeks podcast. If you need expert advice or training for your fleet business, make Flagship Partners your first choice. We are really excited to announce the launch of our Transport Manager Academy. With expert development for fleet leaders, we offer fully accredited initial Transport Manager CPC training, CPC refresher, and operator license awareness training, as well as mentoring, support, and professional development beyond the qualification. Our vision is to develop elite fleet professionals.
Yes. And I think with anything, I think it's how people perceive the Traffic Commissioner's Office. It's how people perceive the Environment Agency. They see them as an enforcement body, and they are. However, they are there to help. If I say to some people, phone the Traffic Commissioner, ask them the question that you've got, and that you won't believe how happy they are to help, because that's what they're there for. So you've got all these regulations. One of the questions I was asked a while back is about the financial standing. They fell under the scope of what was required for that license, and I said, inform them at your earliest opportunity, ideally before the event has actually happened. You will get a period of grace to kind of help you. They'll want to know how, why. It was a vehicle that was broken down. I think it was a gearbox that needed replacing. There was tight on money, and we've got all this money in the bank. We can't use it. I said, well, you can use it. The financial standard requirements are that you have to have this amount of money for the event of anything that happens. So it's there to be used. As long as you tell the Traffic Commissioner, hey, I need some help. Can I use this money? But I'll have it back in 2-3 months. And they'll go, yeah, no worries. And then I expect at the end of that, when you said you're going to have it back, you send them the evidence via a bank statement, and they'll go, brilliant. The same with, it's for anything, a transport manager. I did a post on LinkedIn not so long back. If a transport manager leaves, make sure that you ask for a period of grace before the new one gets put on there, so you can do the both. So if a guy leaves and he gives 30 days notice, and you don't find anybody to right at the end of that 30 days notice, and you go then to add them, that's still a variation to an operator license, even though it's just a transport manager. And the end of that 30 days, the existing transport manager's left, you are without a transport manager. And if you've not contacted or sent some sort of an email to a caseworker asking for that period of grace, they ask why. It's easy to give an explanation and to be upcoming at the start of it, then kind of going back defensively as to why, I should have done that. And that's what we get a lot. Maybe I should have done that. Well, and this is why we're here as consultants, and the same as what you do. We advise people on how to follow the regulations, the interpretation of the regulations, what that means to your business, and how to keep it a good reputation.
Yeah, absolutely. So if someone's listening to this, and is a transport manager in that situation, they've gone in, they've recognised that their operation is moving, sorting, or storing waste in one way or another, and they're looking at COTC, or they might be, or getting someone in, or they might be unhappy. They might be unhappy with the COTC cover they've got, and they get in touch with you. What are the things that, if a transport manager is running that and they're subbing out the COTC cover, where could things be going wrong? Where could there potentially be some issues for them to look out for, if that makes sense? What are the top issues you see where people are just sort of taking the money and not really doing the job they should be doing?
Yeah, it's exactly that. They take the money, they don't do anything, they pop in for a coffee on a Saturday morning. They're taking it a lot less than what the industry standard costs are. So it's getting a value for money. So if somebody does require that COTC cover, obviously they've got a permit. One of the things that I'm doing at the minute is for a large recycling company. So they're expected to have, generally speaking, you need 20% of the operating time. That's how much cover you need. So if you're 5 days, you need 1 day, sort of generally 8 hours. There's a company I'm working for at the minute where we're doing the COTC cover. We're identifying things on a daily walk around. We do a site inspection. Then, part of that is, they've had some issues with the Environment Agency. We had an inspection last week and it was over the moon. There's still things that need to get fixed. One of the things is when the Environment Agency come on site, anybody that has a permit will understand that they like to ask questions, and not just to the management, to the people who are working on the site, the yard operatives, because, you know, if you've got an EMS and a fire prevention plan, you have to communicate that information out to people. And then they come on site and they'll say, do you know much about your EMS? And they'll go, yeah, I ain't got a clue. So one of the things I've put together is a training matrix on who needs to know what. So if you've got a site operative, in terms of the permit boundaries, where they're allowed to store the waste, you know, waste segregation, waste height, waste storage, they need to know about that. But they don't need to know about the permit, you know, in detail. They don't need to know, you know, stuff that's just for the management. So we're creating a training matrix and putting everything into toolbox talk, so people have, you know, one of the specific things is, you know, from an external point of view, somebody coming into a business with a hard hat and a high vis, walking around and just ripping that company to pieces. People need to know why, and that's the biggest thing. It's informing them and educating about what COTC cover is, why is it necessary, what we do, and just giving a bit of education, and you know, and not as a company who requires COTC cover, not just accepting somebody that's going to come on site, pay them 50 quid just so they've got a certificate in the back office that they can show the Environment Agency when they turn up. It's a lot more than that. You know, we're going to the waste transfer notes on, are they filled in correctly? You know, the consignment note section 8 is one of the biggest things that the Environment Agency pull up on the final disposal. Do they have duty of care on anybody that's bringing waste in? Do they have a carrier's license? If you get some one-man band who's got a van and says, I'll come and clear all your rubbish off your front garden for you for 50 quid, and then that guy takes it and dumps it on the, you know, fly tips it, who's responsible? Both. Because if they find anything with your name and address on in that rubble, you are getting a fine or worse. So everybody's got a duty of care.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So with the COTC cover, is it a bit like your CPC, right? So if the traffic commissioner finds that you've got a reputational issue, that you can lose your repute. In the same way, can you lose your repute around your COTC cover? Is it reputational based? Can they take that away, or do they blacklist you as a COTC person when you register as that?
No. So it's slightly different. I think one of
so there could be really bad COTC people out there at the moment.
Yeah, as long as they're passing.
I know you're smiling like there are some bad ones.
There's a lot. As long as they're passing the continuing competence. I mean, this is one of the things that I find fascinating within waste and transport. I think I've done transport a long time, and the same with waste. If you get two companies, one waste, one transport, the transport one doesn't listen to you as a transport manager, as long as you document that. I mean, for me, it's, you know, I have been to a public inquiry, and I would never want to go to one again. I mean, I'll keep it short. I worked for an operator. I tried to meet them. They would never meet me. They got the license. I invoiced. They wouldn't pay me, and they sent an email to me saying, "Why would we pay you if we're not operating?" And I just went, "Yeah, I'm done." And I emailed the traffic commissioner and said, "Please remove me from this license immediately." Even just, you know, getting to see the site and, you know, getting the compliance, the forward planner, the policies, all that kind of stuff done, they never met me. And I think it was about 8 months later, I got a letter being invited to a public inquiry because my repute was in question. And on the day that I resigned, and it was a coincidence, on the day I resigned, it was pulled by DVSA and they had 7 SMART prohibitions on that vehicle.
Wow.
And lucky for me, I don't delete emails. And this is the one piece of advice: is if you're going to communicate anything to an operator that's, you know, where they're not following any regulations, you have to do it on email and keep it. Don't delete them. But the difference is as well, you know, you've got an environment, a company that's got a permit, and they are not doing what you say they need to do to remain compliant, and you can do it till you're blue in the teeth, and you're taking the money every month, you're doing what they are paying you to do, and then the EA come on site and they get into, you know, a lot of trouble. They take their permit off them. nothing gets happened to the guy who does a COTC. And I think, it's nice that, we can stay with an operator and say, you're not doing it right, and then we can carry on. But in terms of, there needs to be some accountability, because there's operators out there that are doing a lot of things wrong and they don't know it. They're guys that's doing their COTC cover, just not communicating it. They just want the money. They've got another 50 companies out there, each paying them a very small amount of money just for that certificate, and it's not how it should be done.
Makes sense. Are you limited? So with an external transport manager, you're allowed 4 operators and up to 50 vehicles. So is there any limit on the number of people that you can COTC cover for?
It's not as strict as the operator license. It's a case of working time directive. If you've got an operator, they are changing the way COTC cover is going to be done. But generally speaking, as it is now, if you've got an operator that's Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, that's 8 hours. If you've got somebody else, that's 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, that's another 8 hours. If you've got somebody that's 24 hours, 7 days a week, generally speaking, that's about 36 hours cover. And there's only so many days in a week.
Yeah.
So there are a limit, but it's not a written down limit like you get on the traffic commissioner's basis.
Got you. Okay, cool. And I suppose they're not monitoring that either, if that makes sense. I'm assuming where the traffic commissioner's monitoring it, I imagine this has been less. This is a little bit looser. It
is, yeah. It's all about communication, and historically, the Environment Agency don't really communicate with different areas. They are starting to now. They are getting very proactive. They'll have sort of instances where 1 month they might concentrate on ELVs. Where's the biggest issue? Where's the biggest problem that we're facing at the minute? So that's one of the other problems. So when somebody applies for a permit, they have to provide a COTC certificate for that application. If somebody leaves, be it a month or a year after, they can continue to operate if the Environment Agency doesn't turn up. If they turn up and they don't have that cover, they can, they do when they turn up, they do a car report. So that's a compliance assessment report, and they'll give them, a time limit to make sure they get that person filled in. But there's no register on companies on who's their TCM. So yeah, they don't know unless they turn up. And I think that's one of the things that needs to be looked at, because by my reckoning, there's thousands of companies that don't have COTC cover, and they should. They're not getting the right information to remain compliant.
Got you. Wow, it's absolutely fascinating. And Chris, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast to share some of your expertise on it. Is there anything, just finally, I suppose, is there anything I've not asked that would be useful for people listening if they're interested in this? Like, is there anything else they need to know? When is a good time? If a transport manager's in and they're not sure about stuff, when's the trigger point? Is it an application that you'd help with? What is it that is the trigger point for you to go, for them to go, yeah, Chris, we need your help?
At any point, I think if from a perspective, if there's a new transport manager joining a company that deals with waste, there should be somebody there dealing with that. So if he's got questions that he's not sure of, that's the time, because there should be somebody on site. There should be that COTC. Most large companies have that kind of within their health and safety department. Call kind of rolls into one. Any questions? Yeah, I'm always open to. I don't charge for telephone calls.
Do you not? So you're happy? You're happy for people to look you up on their website. So if they look the website up, they can give you a shout. You'll have a chat with them, and you'll see if you can help, mate. Yeah. Yeah,
there is a bit of legislation that's changing from next year. I think it's around April 25. So it's how waste is tracked. So I think from the historically how things, it's all about waste and how it's been moved. So the transfer notes, the paper-based carbon copy transfer notes, they're trying to do away with them. Then they went on to electronic consignment notes. Now they're looking at waste tracking in real life. So that is open from this year. Not sure when. If you look waste tracking on the EA's website, you'll find more information. But that's coming in from April 2025. So it does change a lot on how we record and how we analyse. So it just gives the Environment Agency better visibility on what waste is going where, because you've got a lot of, if anybody that knows about waste, it's the DNR codes, disposal or recovery. So you've got your waste hierarchy on when things actually become waste. It's like health and safety. If you've got a hazard, the best form of prevention is to removing the hazard. PPE is the worst. It's the last thing in the line. It's same with waste. It's you reuse it, recycle it. There's a whole hierarchy list on what you need to do before it then becomes waste that you can't really do anything with. And it's zero to landfill. A lot of companies are going zero to landfill because it's the future. I mean, the cost on landfill alone. If you take a ton of waste, with clinical waste in the tiger bags, we used to take that to landfill. It used to cost £25 a ton. The landfill tax on that was over 100. So it's not a cheap option. It's an easier option, but it's not the cheaper option, and it's not the best for the environment as well. So there's always other options. But yeah, any questions?
Blowing my brains. What I'll do for the listeners is in the show notes of this podcast, I'll put the link in for Chris's website. If you're interested, you can go and click on his website. You can go and have a chat with him. Chris's name is Chris Kehoe. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I always have to double check because it's pronounced like it's got a Y and it hasn't. But Chris Kehoe, you're on LinkedIn and that kind of stuff as well. So drop your line on there. Chris, you've been an absolute star, mate. I know you are looking forward to this podcast with full anticipation and absolutely delighted to be on it. And I think you've done an absolutely sterling job, mate. So thanks for joining me. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you drop me any comments. Thank you very much, Chris, for joining me. I'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you very much.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please share with your friends and colleagues too. Join us for free on Facebook with the Fleet Geeks community for transport and fleet managers. Fleet Geeks offers ongoing professional development, networking and mentoring too. So get in touch with me, Pete Rushmer, on any social media platform to find out more.